Maple Street was quiet, almost too quiet, in the summer of 1952. But one missing heiress would soon shatter the town's peace, and Detective Samuel Reed would discover that even familiar streets can hide dark secrets. Maple Street had always seemed serene, tree-lined sidewalks, picket fences, and the occasional hum of a passing car. Yet on the morning Eleanor Mayfield disappeared, the quiet town of Crestwood began to feel off. Detective Samuel Reed arrived at the Mayfield estate, a sprawling house of brick and ivy, its front door wide open as if inviting trouble. Reed was a man in his late 40s, tall, with a calm, deliberate air. His trench coat brushed against the polished steps as he surveyed the scene. Mrs. Mayfield, a refined woman with gray-streaked hair, trembled in the parlor. "Detective Reed, my Eleanor, she's gone. No note, no sign, just gone." Reed nodded, noting her distress but remaining calm. "When was the last time anyone saw her?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Last night, at the gala. She was supposed to meet friends, return home by 10. She never arrived. Her room, it's untouched. Nothing missing. It's as if she vanished into thin air." Reed made his way upstairs, examining Eleanor's room. Everything was in place. The neatly made bed, the wardrobe doors shut, her favorite books on the shelf. Yet something felt off. A faint scent of perfume lingered in the air, different from Eleanor's usual fragrance. He crouched beside her vanity. A folded note lay partially hidden beneath a jewelry box. The handwriting was elegant, unfamiliar. "Do not trust the shadows. They watch closer than you think." Reed frowned. He had seen threats before, but this was subtle, deliberate. Someone wanted Eleanor found, or wanted her gone entirely. The detective returned downstairs to Mrs. Mayfield. Did she have any recent disagreements? Friends who might have felt slighted? Mrs. Mayfield shook her head. "Eleanor, she was kind, considerate. But she mentioned being worried about someone following her. I thought it was imagination, a girl's fancy." Reed's mind raced. A missing heiress, a cryptic note, and possible surveillance. It painted a picture of someone with both cunning and motive. He stepped outside, scanning the manicured grounds. Across the street, Maple Street's usual calm masked subtle movements. A figure in a dark coat slipping behind a hedge, watching. Reed's instincts sharpened. Whoever had taken Eleanor was clever, patient, and already blending back into the town's shadows. His next steps were clear. Speak with neighbors, retrace her route, and investigate anyone with access to the gala, especially those who may have felt slighted by the Mayfields. Reed felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle over him. Time was crucial. Reed's eyes lingered on a lamppost across the street. A scrap of cloth caught on the ironwork, fluttering slightly in the breeze, a piece of a dress Eleanor might have worn. He bent to examine it. She was here, he muttered under his breath. And someone knew exactly where she'd go next. Detective Reed begins tracing the trail of the missing heiress. Every step down Maple Street reveals more than just footprints. It exposes secrets the town had long tried to hide. Detective Samuel Reed moved carefully along Maple Street, his eyes scanning every detail. Even the smallest anomaly could be a clue. Footprints in the dew on the lawn, a slight scuff near a side gate, or a bent branch. Anything might lead him to Eleanor. He approached the Mayfield neighbors, beginning with Mr. Collins, a retired postal worker who prided himself on noticing everything. "Morning, Detective," Collins greeted him. "Terrible business about young Eleanor. I didn't see much last night, mostly the gala folks leaving in cars, but I did notice a delivery boy lingering near the hedge across from your property. Odd fellow, I thought." Reed took careful note. "Delivery boy? Any description?" Collins squinted. Small frame, cap pulled low. Didn't linger long, but he glanced around like he was checking something. "Could be nothing, but nothing sometimes leads to everything." Reed thanked him and moved on, observing the small streets and alleyways Eleanor might have taken. The faint smell of perfume lingered again, and he spotted faint scuff marks in the dirt, consistent with a hurried walk or struggle. Returning to the Mayfield estate, he consulted the cryptic note. "Do not trust the shadows?" The words nagged at him. A warning, yes, but for whom? Eleanor? Or Reed himself? He gathered a few of the gala guests who were still in town. A young socialite, Miss Adelaide Carrington, claimed to have seen Eleanor leaving with a tall man in a dark coat. Tall, unremarkable, but he had a certain presence, Adelaide said, wringing her gloves. She seemed nervous. I tried to call after her, but she didn't hear me. Reed scribbled notes. Anything distinctive about him? Voice, accent, gait? Adelaide hesitated. Soft voice, careful steps, but confident. Not someone you'd mistake for a stranger in town. Reed frowned. A tall man, confident, familiar with the neighborhood. It narrowed the possibilities. By mid-afternoon, Reed returned to the scene across the street, where the scrap of cloth had caught his attention. The fragment was pale pink, delicate silk, likely torn in the struggle or hastily left behind. He bagged it as evidence. Cole, his assistant from previous cases, arrived with news. Detective, there's something unusual. The gala's guest book shows several names crossed out, and one, Mr. Thorne, left without signing. He's new in town, but his connections appear to stretch far. Reed's brow furrowed. Thorne, the delivery boy, perhaps? Or connected to him? Cole shrugged. Could be. But his timing matches Eleanor's disappearance. And the crossed-out entries, deliberate omissions. As dusk approached, Reed returned to the Mayfield estate, retracing Eleanor's final known steps. Every shadow seemed larger now, every rustle more ominous. The town's familiar streets felt alien, as though hiding something behind every corner. A sudden noise, a soft tap at the parlor window, made Reed freeze. Through the glass, a folded note had been left, pinned against the pane with a small pebble. He picked it up cautiously. The message, written in an elegant, deliberate hand, read, "The clock is ticking. Follow the path before it's too late." Reed's eyes narrowed. Someone wants us to chase, but where? Detective Reed follows the cryptic messages left for him, tracing the missing heiress' steps. But in the dim alleys of Crestwood, shadows have minds of their own, and some secrets are waiting to strike. The note trembled slightly in Detective Samuel Reed's hand as he studied the words, "The clock is ticking. Follow the path before it's too late." He knew the author was careful, deliberate, someone used to being unnoticed. But they wanted him to find something, or perhaps someone. He pocketed the note and stepped carefully onto the side street behind the Mayfield estate. The alley was narrow, lined with brick walls darkened by years of rain and ivy. Reed's eyes scanned every shadow, every glint of light reflected on glass or metal. A soft scuff from behind made him pause. Reed's hand rested on his revolver as he turned toward the sound. A figure darted across the alley, small, nimble, and cloaked in darkness. Reed moved cautiously, keeping his distance. "Wait," he called. "I'm Detective Reed. Stop running." The figure froze for a moment, then slipped into a narrow doorway. Reed approached slowly and discovered a hidden entrance to a small courtyard behind an old tailor shop. Inside, he found a scattering of papers, maps of the town, notes about Eleanor's movements, and a small photograph of the heiress smiling at the gala. Reed picked up the photograph. Someone had been tracking Eleanor carefully, noting her routines. But why leave this here? He examined the notes. They were detailed, showing escape routes, likely hideouts, and possible contacts. One name appeared repeatedly. Jonathan Pike, a new arrival in Crestwood who had been seen at the gala but avoided introductions. Reed's mind raced. Pike could be the key to finding Eleanor. The figure in the alley may have been a messenger, or someone testing him. Either way, the trail was real, and time was critical. Suddenly, a noise from the far side of the courtyard drew his attention. A shadow moved across a boarded-up window, slipping out as quickly as it appeared. Reed pursued, but the narrow alleyways twisted and turned, forcing him to pause at a small intersection. He noticed faint footprints in the dust, not Eleanor's, but someone light, quick, and careful. They led deeper into the older part of Crestwood, where the streets narrowed and the gas lamps flickered weakly in the early evening. Drayton's voice echoed in his memory. "Detective, trust the path, but beware the shadows. Not all guides are friendly." Reed's instincts screamed caution. Whoever was leading him wanted him to follow, but they may have set traps. Every corner, every dark doorway could conceal danger, yet the trail could not be ignored. Eleanor's life might depend on it. He stopped briefly at a street corner and surveyed the buildings. One structure, an abandoned bakery, stood out. Its windows were dusty, broken in places, but inside, movement suggested someone was hiding or waiting. Reed drew a deep breath, revolver in hand, and stepped toward the door. As he reached the threshold, a shadow detached itself from the far wall, tall, deliberate, and silent. The figure stepped into the dim glow of the gas lamp, revealing just enough to make Reed's pulse quicken. "You're following the path," a low voice said, calm but unnerving. "But are you ready for what comes next?" Reed froze. "Who are you?" he demanded, knowing the answer could change everything. In the abandoned bakery on Crestwood's oldest street, Detective Reed faces his first real test. Every dusty corner and broken window hides a clue, and possibly, the missing heiress herself. Detective Samuel Reed paused at the doorway of the old bakery. The boards covering the windows rattled slightly in the breeze, and the smell of stale flour and damp wood filled the air. Every instinct he possessed told him to proceed cautiously. This was no longer just a missing person case. Someone had orchestrated Eleanor Mayfield's disappearance carefully, and the bakery seemed central to the plan. He stepped inside, lantern raised, the light slicing through the gloom. Broken crates and flour sacks littered the floor. Shadows stretched along the walls, giving the illusion of movement even where none existed. "Hello?" Reed called softly. "Eleanor Mayfield, if you're here, it's all right. We're trying to help." A faint rustling answered him. Reed stiffened, gripping his revolver. Slowly, he moved toward the sound, careful not to startle anyone who might be hiding. Behind a large, overturned workbench, he found a small bundle of cloth. Reed knelt, lifting it cautiously. It was a shawl belonging to Eleanor, unmistakable from its pale pink silk and embroidered pattern. "Someone brought her here," he muttered under his breath. "But where is she now?" His eyes scanned the room and caught a glimmer on the far wall. A set of footprints leading through a partially open side door. Reed followed silently, stepping over splintered wood and dusty floorboards. The narrow passage opened into a small alley behind the bakery, leading toward the riverbank. As he emerged, Reed noticed signs of recent activity: flattened grass, scuff marks, and faint tire tracks in the mud. Someone had moved Eleanor, but where? And why the careful trail left behind for him to follow? He paused to examine the ground more closely. Among the mud and dirt was a folded note, soaked slightly from the afternoon drizzle. Reed picked it up and unfolded it carefully. Written in the same elegant hand as the previous notes were the words, "The next step is the Ferris Mill. Midnight reveals all." Reed's heart quickened. Ferris Mill had been abandoned for years, a place whispered about by the townsfolk for its eerie reputation and creaking machinery. Why would Eleanor be taken there? And who was guiding him with these cryptic messages, friend or foe? Drayton's warning echoed again: not all guides are friendly. Reed felt a pang of caution. Someone wanted him to find Eleanor, but the journey might be a trap. Every shadow along the river, every sound of water against stone, seemed amplified. He noticed a small bundle of papers wedged under a brick at the alley's edge. The documents contained sketches of the Ferris Mill, notes on structural weaknesses, and references to a hidden attic. Whoever wrote them had intimate knowledge of the building. Reed's mind raced. Eleanor may have been moved there intentionally, but the level of planning suggested the kidnapper was meticulous, calculating, and confident that no one could reach her in time. From the shadows behind him, a sudden sound, a soft, deliberate step, made Reed whirl. The alley was empty, but he could feel someone observing. Someone had been waiting for him to pick up the trail, guiding him subtly toward the next location. Reed pressed a hand to his revolver and whispered, "This ends at the Ferris Mill. One way or another, we'll see the truth." From deeper in the alley, the faint echo of laughter, soft, deliberate, almost amused, sent a chill down his spine. "Are you ready, detective?" The Ferris Mill has stood silent for years, a relic of Crestwood's past. But tonight, its creaking beams and shadowed corners hold the missing heiress, and Detective Reed must confront danger he cannot yet see. Detective Samuel Reed approached Ferris Mill under the cloak of night, the moon casting pale light across the river that ran alongside the building. The mill, long abandoned, loomed like a sentinel, its broken windows and rusting gears hinting at years of decay. Yet tonight, it pulsed with a quiet menace, as if aware of the trespassers approaching. Reed's lantern swung in the darkness, illuminating the graffiti-scarred walls and the faint outline of a water wheel turning silently in the slow current. Every creak and groan of the old structure made him pause. The air smelled of damp wood and old machinery, a stark contrast to Eleanor's delicate perfume that lingered in his memory. He stepped cautiously across the riverbank, noting footprints leading to a side entrance partially hidden by vines. As he pushed open the door, the hinges groaned loudly, sending echoes through the cavernous interior. Inside, the mill was a maze of broken staircases, lofts, and rusted equipment. Shadows danced in the lantern light, each one threatening to conceal a trap. "Eleanor?" Reed called softly. His voice bounced off the walls, answering only with the sound of distant dripping water. A faint shuffle from above drew his attention. Reed climbed the creaking stairs, each step deliberate. The second floor opened into a long loft overlooking the main machinery, and at the far end, he saw a figure. Eleanor. She was sitting on an old wooden crate, hands tied, but unharmed. Her eyes widened at the sight of Reed. "Detective, you found me." Reed rushed forward, checking her bindings. "I promised I would. Are you all right?" Before she could answer, a shadow detached itself from the far corner of the loft. Lydia Brant, the mastermind behind Eleanor's disappearance, stepped into the lantern's glow, her expression calm but calculating. "Detective Reed," she said, her voice smooth. "I knew you'd follow the trail. Clever, but predictable." Reed tightened his grip on the revolver. "It's over, Lydia. Release her, and the authorities will handle the rest." Lydia's smile didn't waver. "Do you really think it's that simple? Every step you've taken, every note, every clue, was meant to test you. But the game isn't finished." Suddenly, the floor beneath them groaned. A loose beam threatened to collapse, sending dust and debris falling. Eleanor screamed, ducking behind a support column. Reed stepped protectively in front of her, eyes on Lydia. "You won't leave here with her," Lydia said, advancing slowly. Reed's mind raced. The loft's structure was fragile, and any confrontation risked bringing the whole floor down. Yet hesitation was dangerous. He needed to end this carefully, or all would be lost. He glanced around and noticed a rope hanging near the pulleys of the water wheel. A quick plan formed in his mind. If he could destabilize the wheel, it might distract Lydia long enough to free Eleanor and escape safely. As Reed moved silently toward the rope, Lydia's sharp eyes caught his motion. "So, the clever detective has a trick up his sleeve," she said, her voice slicing through the mill's silence. Reed froze. Every second mattered now, and one wrong move could mean disaster for him, and for Eleanor. The Ferris Mill trembles as Detective Reed confronts Lydia Brant. Every creaking floorboard and swinging beam becomes a threat, and the race to save Eleanor has only just begun. Detective Samuel Reed's heart pounded as he seized the rope near the pulleys. The idea was simple. Create a distraction, but it had to work flawlessly. One wrong move could send the fragile loft collapsing, taking Eleanor with it. Lydia Brant's eyes narrowed. "Trying to outsmart me, detective?" she hissed, advancing carefully, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. Reed tugged sharply on the rope. The water wheel outside groaned, the chain rattling against its supports. Dust and loose flour sacks tumbled from the rafters, momentarily obscuring Lydia's vision. "Now!" Reed shouted to Eleanor. She scrambled from her hiding spot, her hands still tied but her agility intact. Together, they ducked toward the staircase leading down to the mill's main floor. Lydia recovered quickly, her calm facade replaced with irritation. "You think this will stop me?" she shouted, lunging toward Reed. The floor groaned beneath her weight. Reed and Eleanor moved faster, every step calculated. Loose planks creaked ominously, and he had to leap over a broken beam to avoid falling into the machinery below. The scent of rust and water mingled with the faint perfume from Eleanor's scarf, a reminder of what was at stake. Reed glanced over his shoulder. Lydia was relentless. Her eyes burned with a mix of frustration and fury. He knew the chase through the mill's twisting corridors was not just physical, it was a test of wits. One misstep, and the entire building could collapse. They reached the main floor. Shadows of gears and conveyor belts stretched across the walls. Reed's eyes searched frantically for an exit. There, a small door near the back, partially hidden by old sacks of grain. "Through there," he urged Eleanor. She nodded, gripping his arm as they moved quickly. Lydia caught up just as they reached the door, attempting to block their escape. Reed shoved a crate toward her, buying precious seconds. Eleanor struggled to untie her hands, fumbling nervously but with determination. Reed whispered instructions, guiding her through the knots. Outside, the moonlight illuminated the riverbank. They stumbled into the open air, the cool breeze carrying the scent of water and earth. Reed kept a steady grip on Eleanor's arm, moving toward the path that led back to the town. Behind them, Lydia's scream echoed through the mill. A loud groan signaled a partial collapse. The building shuddered as beams and dust tumbled down. Reed dared not look back. The danger inside was immediate enough. They had escaped, and that was what mattered. Once at a safe distance, Eleanor turned to Reed. "Detective, I thought I'd never get out." She was relentless. Reed helped her steady her footing. "You're safe now, Eleanor. But we need to make sure she can't harm anyone again." Drayden, who had been waiting with the authorities outside, approached quickly. "Reed, did you get her?" Reed nodded. "She's safe. But Lydia Brant isn't finished. She underestimated us, and she knows the law is closing in." As the first police officers secured the area around Ferris Mill, a shadow moved silently along the edge of the riverbank. Lydia Brant had survived the chase. She vanished into the night, a dangerous presence still lurking, plotting her next move. Reed watched the dark water, eyes narrowing. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Not by a long shot. Lydia Brant is still at large, and Detective Reed realizes the danger isn't over. Every familiar street and alley in Crestwood could hide a trap, and the heiress' safety depends on uncovering the shadow behind the crime. Detective Samuel Reed returned Eleanor Mayfield safely to the Mayfield estate, but relief was tempered by the knowledge that Lydia Brant had escaped. The Ferris Mill had been a test of wit and courage, and now the real challenge began: tracking Lydia before she vanished completely. Reed gathered with Samuel Drayden and Harris Cole in the parlor. Maps of Crestwood were spread across the table, pins marking locations of recent activity: the gala, the alley behind the tailor shop, and the Ferris Mill. "We need to anticipate her next move," Reed said, tracing the route with his finger. "Lydia is smart, resourceful. She's leaving a trail, yes, but it's deliberate, a pattern meant to mislead and challenge us." Cole nodded. "Her target may not just be Eleanor. She could be manipulating the town itself. Any attempt to stop her head-on could backfire." Eleanor, still shaken but determined, spoke softly. "Detective, I remember a place she mentioned once, a safe house outside of town. She called it the old railway cabin. She spoke of it casually at the gala, but I didn't realize its significance." Reed's eyes sharpened. "Good memory. That might be our best lead. It's isolated, easy to defend, and perfect for laying low." Drayden added, "It's several miles outside Crestwood, along the abandoned railway line. We can reach it by car tonight, but we need to be careful. She may have traps or accomplices waiting." As night fell, the trio drove quietly along the winding road leading out of town. Moonlight reflected off the wet asphalt, and the mist from the nearby river made the journey eerily quiet. Every shadow along the roadside seemed exaggerated, every rustle in the trees potentially hiding danger. Arriving at the old railway cabin, Reed noticed signs of recent activity. Footprints leading to the side door, a faint glow of lantern light through the cracked windows. He motioned for Eleanor and Cole to stay behind while he approached. Inside, the cabin smelled of smoke and damp wood. Reed's lantern illuminated a modest interior, a fireplace with embers still glowing, a small table with maps and scattered papers. The scene was meticulous, but the absence of Lydia confirmed she was either watching from nearby or preparing her next move. Then Reed noticed a folded note pinned to the mantel with a tack. Carefully, he unfolded it. "Clever, detective. You found my hideout, but the game is far from over. Midnight brings clarity, if you survive it." Reed's jaw tightened. Lydia's pattern was clear. She was forcing him to chase her, leaving cryptic notes that alternated between taunts and guidance. Her intelligence and precision made the hunt dangerous, but also predictable, enough to plan a countermeasure. As the clock in the cabin chimed midnight, Reed glimpsed movement through the fog outside. A shadow flitted between the trees, deliberate and cautious. Lydia Brant had returned, and the hunt was about to reach its most dangerous chapter yet. Lydia Brant has returned, and the clock strikes midnight. Detective Reed realizes the hunt is no longer just about finding Eleanor. It's about surviving the final trap laid by a cunning adversary. Detective Samuel Reed crouched behind the corner of the cabin, lantern dimmed, his senses sharp. The fog thickened around the abandoned railway line, muffling the sound of the river and making every footstep echo unnaturally. He could see Lydia Brant moving with deliberate grace, assessing the surroundings, clearly aware of the trap she had prepared. Reed motioned to Eleanor and Cole, whispering, "Stay low, watch for any signals. She's testing us, but we'll turn it around." Lydia paused near the tree line, glancing toward the cabin, then raised her hand slightly. A low whistle carried faintly through the fog. Reed realized immediately. Someone else might be assisting her, hidden in the shadows. "Two of them," he muttered under his breath. "She isn't taking any chances." The plan was risky, but Reed knew hesitation would be deadly. He inched toward a stack of old crates, using them as cover while observing the enemy. Lydia's movements were methodical. She wanted to draw him out, likely toward the riverbank where the footing was unstable. Reed whispered to Cole, "If she leads us there, we can use the terrain. Be ready to flank from the left." Eleanor, still anxious but resolute, clutched the lantern. "Detective, I can help. I know this path. I remember the shortcuts near the river, old service paths behind the mill." "Good," Reed said. "We'll use that knowledge. Timing is everything." They moved silently, shadows among shadows. Reed counted the paces, tracking Lydia's steps while ensuring Eleanor stayed calm. Suddenly, Lydia's whistle echoed again, sharper this time. A second figure emerged from the mist, tall, silent, and armed with a length of rope. Reed froze. "She's trying to corner us," he whispered. "Move." The chase led them toward a small clearing near the river's edge. The ground was uneven, slippery from recent rain. Lydia's figure appeared larger, more confident in the moonlight, taunting them. Reed had anticipated this, and had a plan. With a quick signal, Cole and Eleanor moved along the side, using the service path Eleanor had remembered. Reed drew Lydia's attention, stepping into the open. "You've underestimated us, Lydia," he shouted. She paused, narrowing her eyes. "This ends tonight." Reed tripped a carefully positioned wire he had spotted near a fallen branch. A pulley system, likely intended as a trap for anyone following, triggered, but he had planned for it. The rope snared Lydia's accomplice, yanking him into a shallow ditch, giving Reed and Eleanor a moment to act. Lydia cursed and advanced, but Reed sidestepped, catching her arm and twisting just enough to unbalance her. Eleanor joined in, using a strong pull to guide Lydia toward the riverbank where the police had arrived silently, surrounding the area. Within moments, Lydia was restrained, her calm facade replaced by fury and disbelief. Reed finally exhaled. Eleanor was safe. The final trap had been neutralized, and the mastermind's plan thwarted. As the police led Lydia away, she hissed, "You may have won this time, detective, but shadows always return." Reed watched her disappear into the night. He knew she spoke partly in threat, partly in truth. In Crestwood, secrets lingered, but justice had prevailed, for now. With Lydia Brant captured, the immediate danger has passed, but Detective Reed knows that the shadows she cast over Crestwood may linger. Returning to Maple Street, he seeks closure for Eleanor and the town itself. The first rays of dawn broke over Crestwood as Detective Samuel Reed escorted Eleanor back to the Mayfield estate. The fog had lifted, leaving Maple Street bathed in a soft, golden light. The familiar tree-lined sidewalks and quiet houses seemed almost ordinary, but Reed knew better. The past weeks had revealed a darkness hiding beneath the town's peaceful exterior. Eleanor's hands were finally free, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and lingering fear. "Detective," she said softly, "I can't thank you enough. You saved my life, and perhaps more than that, you saved our town from her influence." Reed smiled faintly, adjusting his trench coat. "You were brave, Eleanor. That courage helped more than you realize. But the town needs to understand that shadows can linger, even after the light returns." Back at the estate, neighbors and friends had gathered, their faces showing relief and curiosity. The news of Lydia Brant's capture had spread quickly, but the full story of her manipulations would take time to reach everyone. Reed knew that some secrets of Crestwood would remain hidden, yet the town's heart had been preserved. He walked Eleanor through her room, noting how untouched it remained after all the turmoil. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the delicate silk shawl she had lost at the Ferris Mill. Reed placed it gently back on her dresser. "Every piece of this puzzle mattered," he said. "From the notes to the clues in the alley, to the Ferris Mill, and your memory of the railway cabin. It all led to the truth." Eleanor nodded, her gaze distant for a moment. "I keep thinking about her. Lydia Brant. She was clever, methodical. I can't help but wonder how many others she manipulated before me." Reed's expression darkened slightly. Perhaps. But she underestimated courage, persistence, and the willingness to follow a trail. That's what brought her down. Outside, Maple Street began to stir. Children walked to school, neighbors tended their gardens, and the occasional car rolled down the avenue, carrying the town back to normalcy. Yet Reed observed closely. Even in the daylight, he noted small details. A shutter slightly askew, footprints in the morning dew, and the quiet watchfulness of the town's residents. Shadows do not disappear completely, but awareness is a shield. Drayton, who had assisted with the final capture, joined them on the porch. "Reed, do you think it's truly over?" Reed looked down Maple Street. "For now. Lydia Brant has been taken into custody, the heiress is safe, and Crestwood can heal. But vigilance is necessary. Shadows often return when least expected." Eleanor smiled faintly, a sense of calm settling over her. "I'll remember that. And I'll appreciate the light even more now." Reed nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility lift slightly. The town's streets were quiet, but there was a sense of hope, a reassurance that courage and persistence could counter even the most deliberate darkness. As Reed turned to leave, a folded piece of paper lay on the sidewalk, carried by the morning breeze. He picked it up and read the words scrawled in elegant handwriting. "Courage has its reward, but every shadow leaves a trace." Reed's jaw tightened. Even with Lydia Brant captured, the reminder lingered. In Crestwood, peace was earned, never given. Crestwood breathes a cautious sigh of relief. Detective Reed reflects on the past weeks, realizing that courage, persistence, and attention to detail have not only saved Eleanor Mayfield but restored the town's sense of security, for now. Detective Samuel Reed walked slowly down Maple Street, the morning sun casting warm light across the familiar sidewalks. Houses stood quiet, their porches empty, save for a few early risers sipping coffee. The town seemed to have returned to its usual rhythm, yet Reed knew the recent events had left a mark that would linger in quiet corners. Eleanor Mayfield followed him, her steps steady, her eyes bright with gratitude. "Detective," she said softly, "I feel as if I can finally breathe again. You brought me back from a nightmare I couldn't even name." Reed nodded, glancing at the street. "You were brave, Eleanor. That courage made a difference. But it wasn't just bravery, it was attention, awareness, and persistence. All the details mattered. Every note, every footprint, every shadow." Eleanor smiled faintly. "It's strange. I always thought my world was safe. But I realize now that even quiet streets have shadows. And some of them can be clever." "Indeed," Reed replied. "But shadows lose power when met with vigilance. Crestwood will recover, slowly but surely. And you'll have the town supporting you, Eleanor." As they approached the Mayfield estate, neighbors came into view. Mr. Collins tending his garden, Mrs. Carrington bringing out morning mail, and children laughing as they ran down the sidewalks. It was ordinary life, yet Reed noticed subtle changes. Eyes a little more watchful, steps a little more measured, a town quietly reminded of what could lurk beneath serenity. Drayton joined them on the porch, carrying Eleanor's recovered belongings from the Ferris Mill. "Reed," he said, "it seems the town can breathe easier. Lydia Brant is behind bars, and the heiress is safe. It's finally done." Reed nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "For now. But shadows always leave traces. We'll need to remain vigilant." Eleanor carefully unpacked her shawl and the small belongings she had left behind at the cabin. "This silk scarf, the notes. I'll keep them," she said. "Not as reminders of fear, but of what courage and careful attention can achieve." Reed allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The investigation had been challenging, a test of patience and wit, but the pieces had fallen into place. Each clue had mattered, every misstep had been avoided, and justice had been served. Outside, the streets of Maple Street seemed to breathe with quiet life. The early morning sunlight glinted off the picket fences and rooftops, revealing a town slowly regaining its innocence. Children's laughter echoed faintly, and the scent of fresh bread from a nearby bakery mingled with the warm air. Reed paused, savoring the ordinary beauty of a place restored to safety. As he tipped his hat to Eleanor and Drayton, a gentle breeze carried a final whisper of warning. Shadows may return, but courage, diligence, and care will always confront them. Detective Samuel Reed watched Maple Street one last time, feeling the satisfaction of a case completed, not just solved, but healed. Crestwood had faced darkness and in doing so, discovered the resilience of its people. Eleanor smiled at him, her eyes bright. "Thank you, detective. Truly." Reed tipped his hat. "Stay vigilant, Eleanor. And remember, even in quiet towns, courage is the light that exposes shadows." The town was calm. The sun climbed higher. And for the first time in weeks, Maple Street seemed at peace, the echoes of danger replaced by the simple rhythm of daily life, and the knowledge that even when shadows return, the light of truth and courage will be waiting.